Many professionals assume that if a patient is gaining strength, then the muscle is working properly, and if the patient sweats, trembles, or says they can really feel it, we take it for granted that the stimulus is correct. But the reality is that the relationship between strength and muscle activity is much more complex. Every time a muscle generates force, it also produces electrical activity, and this activity can be measured using electromyography, or EMG. But here's the key: more strength doesn't always mean more muscle activation, and more muscle activation doesn't necessarily mean a better result either. During the first 4 to 6 weeks of training or rehabilitation, strength improvements are usually not due to hypertrophy, but rather to neural adaptations. The nervous system learns to recruit more motor units, increase their firing rate, synchronize them better, coordinate agonists and antagonists, and reduce unnecessary co-activations. That's why a patient can gain strength without the muscle increasing in size. And from a clinical point of view, this is fundamental, because if you don't generate sufficient neuromuscular activation, there won't be any real adaptation, even if the exercise appears to be correct. For there to be a significant improvement, the muscle must exceed a minimum activation threshold. In many contexts, it is considered that if you do not reach approximately 40% of your maximum voluntary contraction, the stimulus may be insufficient to produce real changes. So, what happens in practice? That many exercises are performed with loads that are too low, with compensations, or in ranges where the target muscle is not the main one involved. The patient works, feels effort, but the muscle we want to strengthen does not receive the necessary stimulus, and without sufficient activation, there is no relevant adaptation. One of the most common mistakes is to confuse the sensation of effort with effective stimulus. A patient might say, "I can really feel it," but that does not mean the correct muscle is working. They might be compensating with another muscle. The effort may be distributed among several structures, or the target muscle may fall below the adaptive threshold. This is where measurement completely changes the approach, because with EMG you can check whether the target muscle is actually being activated, whether it reaches the necessary level, and whether there are any asymmetries or compensatory dominances. Measuring eliminates guesswork. Moreover, a higher EMG signal doesn't always mean something positive. It may indicate fatigue, neuromuscular inefficiency, or that one muscle is compensating for the weakness of another. In patients with pain, for example, a high EMG reading may reflect a defensive or altered pattern rather than a favorable adaptation, so EMG should always be interpreted within the clinical context. Taking into account the exercise, the load, the stage of rehabilitation, the symptoms, and the therapeutic goal, a muscle may be working without actually getting stronger when it does not reach the activation threshold, when it does so intermittently, when it is dominated by a stronger synergist, when the motor pattern's inefficient, when the external load is insufficient, or when fatigue sets in before the stimulus becomes effective. In all these cases, treatment is unnecessarily prolonged, not because the patient is not working, but because the stimulus is not appropriate to generate change. If you want to put this into practice straight away in your clinic, first define which muscle you want to strengthen. Choose a specific exercise, check whether it exceeds the activation threshold, adjust the load if it does not, monitor for compensations, and assess progress every few weeks. Very often, the difference between a slow treatment and an efficient one is not in how much the patient works, but in how and to what extent the correct muscle is activated. Electromyography allows you to know which muscle is actually being activated, how much it is activated, whether the adaptive threshold is exceeded, if there are any relevant asymmetries, and whether the exercise generates a neuromuscular response consistent with your goal, moving away from working by intuition and starting to work with data. Because the relationship between strength and muscle activity is neither linear nor automatic. More strength does not always mean more activation. More activation does not always mean efficiency. And feeling effort does not guarantee adaptation. If you do not understand this relationship, you could be prescribing insufficient loads, reinforcing compensations, or unnecessarily prolonging recovery times. The key is not to do more exercises, but to ensure that the correct muscle receives the necessary stimulus to adapt, because in rehabilitation and performance, it is not the one who works the most who wins, but the one who best stimulates the nervous system. And now I leave you with a question. Are you sure that the exercises you prescribe are generating the necessary activation for your patient to truly gain strength? If you want to stop working based on sensations, better adjust the loads, avoid invisible compensations, and speed up recovery times without improvising, get in touch with us and we'll show you how to integrate EMG into your sessions to measure the real activation of the muscle without adding extra time to your appointment.